Today is Sunday, July 19th, 2026, and today is National Ice Cream Day, which might be one of the easiest national days to celebrate all year. There are very few problems that aren't improved, at least temporarily, by sitting down with a bowl of your favorite ice cream. The only difficult part is deciding whether one scoop is enough. It usually isn't. But as I work through today's history, I noticed something that connected all three stories. Each one started with something ordinary. A cartoon, a bicycle race, and a subway ride. But someone looked at each one of those things and figured out how to make the experience better. Sometimes history doesn't change because someone invents something entirely new. Sometimes it changes because someone makes the familiar unforgettable. Welcome to Wait, That's Random, This Day in History. I'm C.L. Burns, voice actor, audiobook narrator, and someone who apparently spends an unhealthy amount of time wandering through historical rabbit holes so you don't have to. Our first story begins with two characters who have spent more than 80 years trying and spectacularly failing to outsmart each other. On July 19, 1941, audiences were introduced to a cat named Tom and a mouse named Jerry in a short animated film called The Midnight Snack. Although they weren't quite the polished versions we know today, the formula was already there. Tom wanted to catch Jerry. Jerry had other plans, and chaos inevitably followed. At the time, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer was looking for a new animated series that could compete with the enormously popular cartoons being produced by Walt Disney and Warner Brothers. Animators William Hanna and Joseph Barbera were assigned what seemed like a fairly simple idea: a cat chasing a mouse. There was just one problem. Nobody at the studio thought it would last. In fact, after The Midnight Snack was released, some executives questioned whether the series should continue at all. They felt audiences had already seen plenty of cat and mouse cartoons and weren't convinced this one offered anything new. Fortunately, Hanna and Barbera disagreed. Rather than abandoning the concept, they refined it. The animation became more expressive. The timing became sharper. The visual gags became increasingly inventive. Most importantly, Tom and Jerry rarely spoke. Instead, their personalities were revealed through exaggerated expressions, impeccable comic timing, and brilliantly choreographed physical comedy that could be understood almost anywhere in the world. That decision turned out to be one of the series' greatest strengths. Language wasn't the joke, the action was. Over the following decades, Tom and Jerry became one of the most successful animated franchises in history, winning 7 Academy Awards for animated short film and entertaining generations of children and adults across the globe. I've always found it amazing that one of the most beloved rivalries in entertainment almost ended after the very first cartoon. It's a good reminder that first impressions, even professional ones, don't always predict what people will love for decades to come. Speaking of ideas that started small before growing into something much bigger, our next story follows a bicycle race that was never expected to become the world's most famous cycling competition. The Tour de France is so famous today that it's easy to assume it has always been one of the world's biggest sporting events. The truth is, it almost never happened. On July 19, 1903, the very first Tour de France came to an end after nearly 3 weeks of racing across the French countryside. Today, the Tour is watched by hundreds of millions of people around the world. Cyclists ride more than 2,000 miles over mountains, valleys, and winding roads, while fans line the route waving flags and cheering riders they've followed for years. But the original race had a much more practical purpose. It was created to sell newspapers. At the beginning of the 20th century, the French sports newspaper L'Auto was losing readers to rival publications. Looking for something no other newspaper could offer, one of its journalists proposed an outrageous idea. What if they organized a bicycle race around the entire country? It sounded almost impossible. The first tour covered roughly 1,500 miles over 6 stages. Some riders pedaled through the night. Roads were rough, Bicycles were heavy, and there were no support cars following behind. If something broke, riders often had to repair it themselves before continuing. Only 21 of the 60 riders who started the race managed to finish. The winner, Maurice Guerin, completed the course in just under 95 hours of riding time. More importantly, the race accomplished exactly what its organizers had hoped. People couldn't stop talking about it. Newspaper sales more than doubled, and what began as a marketing idea quickly became one of the world's greatest sporting traditions. I've always loved that story because it reminds us that some of history's biggest institutions weren't created because someone wanted to change the world. They were just trying to solve today's problem. Sometimes that's enough. History is full of everyday problems that end up changing everyday life. That brings us to New York City. On July 19, 1967, New York introduced its first air-conditioned subway cars. And if you listened a couple of days ago, you might remember we talked about Willis Carrier inventing modern air conditioning, not to make people comfortable, but to solve a humidity problem in a printing plant. It took decades before that innovation found its way into one of the places people appreciated it most, the New York subway. Before air-conditioned trains, riding the subway during the summer could be miserable. Temperatures inside the tunnels often climbed well above what most people would consider comfortable, especially during rush hour when packed cars trapped even more heat. When the first air-conditioned subway cars entered service, they weren't just introducing a new piece of technology. They were transforming the daily routine of millions of people. Instead of arriving at work already overheated, commuters suddenly had a much more comfortable journey. Over time, air conditioning became an expected part of public transportation, not just in New York, but in cities around the world. It's one of those improvements that's easy to overlook because it's become so ordinary. But imagine experiencing it for the very first time after years of sweltering summer commutes. It must have felt almost magical. But before we wrap up today's stories, today's birthday belongs to Percy Spencer, who was born on July 19, 1894. Spencer's life is a remarkable reminder that curiosity and determination can take you almost anywhere. He was born in rural Maine and faced tremendous hardship early in life. Both of his parents died while he was still a boy, and he left school at a young age to help support himself. Despite having very little formal education, he developed an intense curiosity about how things worked and spent countless hours teaching himself mathematics, electricity, and engineering. That self-education eventually led him to Raytheon, where he became one of the company's most respected engineers. During World War II, his work improving magnetrons, the device that generated powerful microwave energy for radar systems, played an important role in advancing Allied radar technology. Then came the moment that made him famous. While standing near an operating magnetron, Spencer noticed that the chocolate bar in his pocket had melted. Most people would probably have grabbed another candy bar and moved on. Spencer asked why. His curiosity led him to experiment with popcorn kernels, then eggs, eventually proving that microwave energy could cook food quickly and safely. That accidental observation led to the development of the microwave oven, an invention that forever changed kitchens around the world. I've always admired Percy Spencer because his greatest invention didn't begin with a plan. It began with paying attention. The more I thought about today's stories, the more I realized they all have something in common. History doesn't always move forward because someone creates something entirely new. More often, it moves forward because someone looks at an ordinary experience and refuses to believe it's the best it can be. Tom and Jerry transformed a simple cartoon chase into one of the most beloved rivalries in entertainment. The Tour de France turned a newspaper promotion into the world's greatest cycling race. Air-conditioned subway cars made one of the most uncomfortable parts of everyday life dramatically better. And Percy Spencer's curiosity transformed an unexpected accident into one of the most common appliances in modern homes. Progress isn't always about giant leaps. Sometimes it's about making ordinary life just a little better than it was yesterday. Anyway, after today's research, I don't think I'll ever step into an air-conditioned train or use a microwave without wondering how many everyday conveniences started because someone simply noticed something everyone else overlooked. And I'll leave today's final thought to Percy Spencer. The way to succeed is to double your failure rate. If you'd like to hear more of my narration work, podcasts, or other projects, you can find everything at waitthat'srandom.com. I'm C.L. Burns, and thanks for taking a weird little walk through history with me. I'll see you tomorrow.